The sun had just begun to rise over the small town of Willow Ridge, Georgia, a place where the mornings smelled of fresh bread from the local bakery, and the streets stayed quiet until well past 8. On the far end of Maple Street, tucked between an old barber shop and a closed-down hardware store, stood a humble little building with a fading sign that read, Woods Tailoring and Alterations, Esther 1956. Inside, the soft hum of a sewing machine filled the air. Rolls of fabric lay neatly stacked on wooden shelves. Jars of buttons, zippers, and threads lined the walls like colorful constellations. The place felt warm, lived in and comforting, the kind of shop that seemed untouched by time. This was the kingdom of Elijah Woods, a young black tailor in his late 20s, with a quiet determination in his eyes. His grandfather had opened the shop decades ago, and Elijah had spent his childhood here, learning to sew before he even learned to ride a bike. His hands moved with the kind of precision that could only come from years of practice, fast, confident, and artistic. But despite his skill, Elijah wasn't where he wanted to be. He dreamed far beyond the cracked windows and dusty streets of Willow Ridge. While he hemmed old jeans and fixed torn pockets for neighbors, his mind wandered to runways in New York, Los Angeles, and Paris. He wanted to create designs that told stories, bold, expressive, culturally rich pieces inspired by his roots. Fashion was more than fabric to him. It was art, history, and identity woven together. Yet everyone around him treated him only as the guy who fixed clothes cheaply and quickly. That morning, Elijah placed a newly ironed suit on a hanger and glanced at the photo of his grandfather framed above the counter. One day, he whispered, I'll make it. I'll get out of here. As if on cue, the shop's bell chimed sharply. The door swung open and a tall woman stepped inside. She wore a pristine ivory coat, pearl earrings, and a diamond bracelet that sparkled even in the dim light of the shop. Her posture was straight, rigid, the posture of someone used to being respected, obeyed, and admired. Her name was Madeline Harper, the wealthy wife of Senator William Harper. In Willow Ridge, the Harpers were considered untouchable, the kind of family whose name opened doors and silenced rooms. Madeline walked in as though stepping into a place far beneath her. Her eyes scanned the shop, taking in the old sewing table, the mismatched chairs, the antique cash register. Her lips curled slightly as if she had caught the scent of something unpleasant. Elijah stepped forward with a polite smile. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today? Madeline lifted a long garment bag with 2 fingers, like it offended her to even carry it. My dress, she said sharply. I need it repaired, immediately. Elijah opened the bag and gently lifted the dress. A stunning midnight blue designer gown, made from delicate silk. One side had ripped along the seam. It's for the Harper Foundation Charity Gala tonight, she continued. Everyone who matters will be there. Her gaze swept over Elijah from head to toe, not in admiration but in judgment. He kept his tone calm. I can fix this, ma'am. The tear isn't too deep. She raised an eyebrow. Can you? This isn't the kind of fabric people usually handle. Elijah felt a prick in his chest, but he inhaled slowly, refusing to let her see his discomfort. I assure you, he said with steady confidence, I'm fully capable. Madeline exhaled impatiently, as if doing him a favor simply by being there. Then, she walked around the shop, her heels clicking sharply against the old wooden floor. She paused near a pile of mended shirts waiting to be picked up. This place is modest, she said finally, her tone dripping with condescension. I suppose it will have to do. Elijah didn't answer. He carried the gown to his sewing station, examining the tear. The silk felt cool beneath his fingertips, a reminder of how close he was to the world he wanted to enter, and yet, how far. Madeline watched him, arms crossed. Hurry, she demanded. I don't have all day. Elijah nodded, though inside he felt a storm brewing. He threaded the needle, the familiar motion calming him. No matter how she spoke to him, he would do his work with pride. He would show her, and anyone else who doubted him, exactly what he was capable of. As he began to stitch, the morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the floor. He didn't know it yet, but this single interaction, this moment of insult and prejudice in his small, quiet shop, was the spark that would change his life forever. The dress shimmered beneath the soft glow of the shop's overhead light, Midnight blue silk, elegant and fragile, like moonlight trapped in fabric. Elijah adjusted his stool, holding the torn seam delicately between his fingers. He'd fixed 100 gowns before, but never one this expensive, and certainly never for someone like Madeline Harper. She stood nearby, tapping her manicured nails against the counter, her impatience filling the small room like perfume, heavy and suffocating. "Do you always take this long?" she asked finally, her voice sharp as glass. Elijah didn't look up. "Quality takes time, ma'am." Madeline let out a small, humorless laugh. "Quality? From a place like this?" The words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. He focused on the stitches. Tiny, perfect, invisible. Every movement of his hand was calm, but inside, something burned. When she spoke again, her tone was colder. "You know, it's admirable, I suppose, that you're trying to do this sort of work. I just wouldn't have thought—" She paused deliberately, letting the implication hang in the air. "That someone like you would be interested in high fashion." Elijah froze for a moment, his needle suspended midair. "Someone like me?" he asked quietly. Madeline tilted her head, pretending innocence. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I only meant, this industry isn't exactly—" She gestured vaguely. "Your world. It takes a certain background. Education, connections." He met her gaze for the first time. His eyes were calm, but his voice carried a quiet strength. "Talent doesn't care where you're from, ma'am." Madeline smirked. "Perhaps. But talent only gets you so far without the right people believing in you." The shop fell silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the old wall clock. Elijah didn't respond. He simply finished the seam, pressed the fabric flat, and carefully folded the dress back into its bag. When he turned and held it out to her, his hands were steady. "It's done," he said softly. She took the gown, inspecting it skeptically, and then paused. The repair was flawless. The tear had vanished completely, the stitching invisible even under the light. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered in her eyes, but pride smothered it just as quickly. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "I suppose you've done acceptable work." "Thank you," Elijah replied. Madeline turned toward the door, but as she did, a small white card slipped from her clutch and fluttered to the floor. She didn't notice. The bell above the door jingled as she left, her perfume lingering behind. Elijah bent to pick up the card. It was embossed in gold letters. American Vision Runway, National Design Competition. Submission deadline, 2 weeks. He stared at it for a long time, the gears in his mind turning. A fashion design contest. The kind of opportunity that could change a career. The kind of event he'd only read about. Then, he noticed the name printed at the bottom of the card. Madeline Harper, patron and sponsor, of course. He exhaled slowly, staring through the shop window as she drove away in her black luxury car. The insult still echoed in his mind. "Someone like you." He turned the card over in his hand. His reflection shimmered faintly in its glossy surface. Tired eyes, rough hands, but a spark that hadn't died. Maybe she didn't believe in him. Maybe no one did. But she had just dropped the key to the door she thought he'd never open. And for the first time in years, Elijah allowed himself to smile. The next morning, the tailor shop felt different. The same light filtered through the blinds, the same hum of the sewing machine filled the air, but Elijah's hands trembled with a new, electric kind of energy. On the work table lay the gold-embossed card he had picked up from the floor, the one that had slipped from Madeline Harper's purse. American Vision Runway, National Design Competition. The deadline. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to create something extraordinary. 2 weeks to show that talent had no color and that dreams didn't ask for permission. He turned the card over and stared at his reflection in the shiny surface. His eyes were tired but alive. "If they don't believe I belong there," he murmured to himself, "I'll show them why I do." That day, Elijah closed his shop early, something he almost never did. He pinned a note to the door. Closed for a private project. Back soon. Inside, he began pulling every roll of fabric from the shelves. Bright African prints, deep velvets, soft silks, rough denim. The room became a riot of color and texture. Each piece of cloth carried a memory. His mother's laughter, his grandfather's voice, the sound of gospel music on Sunday mornings. He wanted his designs to speak of all of that, not just fashion, but heritage, struggle, and pride. He worked late into the night, sketching under the yellow light of an old lamp. His pencil moved fast, as if it already knew where to go. He drew dresses shaped by rhythm and movement, coats that told stories, jackets that carried the quiet strength of generations before him. When the sun finally rose, his floor was buried under dozens of sketches. His eyes were red, his back ached, but he smiled. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Submitting to the competition wasn't easy. The entry form asked for a portfolio, a professional resume, photographs of his previous work, things Elijah didn't have. He wasn't a graduate of a fancy fashion school, didn't have sponsors or connections. All he had were his creations, the ones sewn in a small town by a man people barely noticed. But he believed in them. He gathered his finest work, a jacket inspired by his grandfather's old Sunday suit, a gown that fused African patterns with sleek modern lines, a trench coat with words from Black poets embroidered inside in golden thread. Each piece told a story of where he came from and where he was determined to go. He wrapped the pieces carefully, mailed them to the competition address in New York City, and waited. The days that followed were endless. Every time the shop bell rang, his heart raced, hoping it was the letter. Then, one Friday morning, it came, an envelope with the competition's golden logo. He tore it open with trembling hands. "Dear Mr. Woods, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to compete in the preliminary round of the American Vision Runway Design Competition in New York City." For a long time, Elijah just stood there, the letter shaking in his hands. He had done it. A man from a small shop in Georgia, the son and grandson of Tailors, had been chosen to compete on one of the biggest stages in fashion. When he arrived in New York a week later, it felt like stepping into another world. The air buzzed with life, with ambition, with noise. The skyscrapers seemed to scrape the sky itself. People rushed past him in expensive clothes, holding coffees, phones, and dreams. He carried only one suitcase. Inside it, the future he had stitched together with his own hands. The competition venue was a vast glass building, modern and gleaming. Inside, everything smelled of money and polish, perfume, leather, and fresh flowers. He walked through the lobby, his heart pounding. Around him were designers from all over the country, young, confident, and mostly white. They wore trendy clothes, carried tablets, and portfolios filled with high-quality photos. When Elijah entered, the conversations quieted just a little. Eyes turned. A few smiles froze halfway. He could feel it, that invisible wall, the same one he had felt his whole life. Doubt, assumption, prejudice wrapped in politeness. A woman at the registration table glanced at him with a polite but skeptical expression. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," Elijah said evenly. "Elijah Woods, contestant." She looked down the list, her manicured finger running over the names. "Ah, here you are." Her tone softened, a little surprise, maybe even curiosity. "Well, Mr. Woods, welcome to American Vision Runway. You can set up in Hall B." He nodded and thanked her. As he walked away, a young designer nearby whispered to his friend, just loud enough for Elijah to hear, "He's a tailor, not a designer." Elijah paused for half a second, then smiled quietly to himself. "We'll see about that," he murmured, and kept walking. For him, this wasn't just a competition. It was a battle. Not with the other designers, but with every wall built by doubt and discrimination. And this time, he was ready to break through it. The day of the competition arrived like a storm Elijah had been waiting for all his life. The city outside buzzed with early morning traffic, but inside the vast glass building of the American Vision Runway competition, there was only the sound of quiet chaos, heels clacking, sewing machines whirring, the low murmur of nervous designers fixing last-minute details. Elijah stood at his station, a small square of workspace surrounded by bright white walls and mirrors. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. Before him hung his collection, 6 pieces that told his story without a single word. The fabrics glowed under the lights, deep earth tones, gold accents, and bold African prints woven with modern cuts. It was elegance and defiance stitched together. Around him, the other designers whispered. Most were young, pale, perfectly styled. They looked like they belonged here, born into this world of fashion, fame, and connections. Elijah could feel their eyes on him, curious and cautious, like he was an unexpected guest who had wandered into the wrong room. A tall man in a suit, one of the organizers, passed by Elijah's station, glanced at his clothes, and said flatly, "Interesting, very cultural." Then he moved on without another word. Elijah bit back a smile. "Cultural," he repeated under his breath. "That's one way to say original." The models began to arrive, slim, elegant figures with practiced faces. Elijah's assigned model, a young woman named Jordan, looked at his designs and raised her eyebrows. "Wow," she said softly. "These are stunning." "Thank you," Elijah replied. "They're meant to move like music." She smiled. "Let's make them dance, then." When the lights dimmed and the audience began to take their seats, Elijah stepped back into the shadows backstage. His heart raced. Through the curtain, he could see flashes of expensive jewelry, champagne glasses, and famous faces. And there, in the front row, sitting like a queen among them, was Madeline Harper. She was wearing the very same blue gown he had mended weeks ago, the one she had sneered at him over. It shimmered beneath the spotlights as she spoke to the man beside her, laughing softly, unaware of who was about to walk out on that runway. The host's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the American Vision Runway competition. Tonight you'll witness the next generation of designers shaping the future of American fashion." Elijah's name was near the end of the list. One by one, the other designers presented their collections. Slick, safe, beautiful, but predictable. The audience clapped politely each time, murmuring small compliments. But Elijah noticed something. There was no soul in their work. Just fabric and form, no heartbeat. Then came the moment he had dreamed of and feared in equal measure. "The next up," the host announced, "a rising designer from Georgia, Elijah Woods." For a second, Elijah couldn't move. Then he inhaled deeply, straightened his shoulders, and nodded to Jordan. The music began, a slow, powerful rhythm of drums and strings. As the first model stepped onto the runway, a hush fell over the crowd. Elijah's designs came alive under